Hello and welcome back to the StoneburnerBooks YouTube channel. Today we are going to see if we can use this Coptic punch with the Multi-Cinch tool to make some Japanese stab bound notebooks. I have a workshop coming up soon and I need to prepare materials for it, and typically I will punch all the holes for the bindings with a single hole punch like this, and as you can imagine that takes a lot of time because there's usually 4 holes per cover for each page, and so it can be a very labor intensive process. So I was hoping to find a way to kind of shortcut it and not have to punch every single thing by hand. And when I was working with this Coptic tool, I realized that the holes are spaced really evenly apart, and that's one key for doing the noble binding of Japanese stab binding. And so I thought I would give it a shot, because if I could punch all the holes evenly and uniformly with just a single, push of the lever, that could really be a time saver for preparing materials for both my own bookbinding work, but especially with this workshop coming up. I wanted to be able to punch a whole lot of pages at once. So let me show you what I ended up doing. I started with just a regular 8.5 by 11 size sheet of paper. I cut it down in half, both ways. And then I also used some cardstock paper that's 8.5 by 11 and punched all of my holes just using this. If you do a standard sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper cut into quarters and you put your guide in the F hole here, it all lines up very easily. Now I wouldn't punch it all like that. I did punch it in batches, but you can use this guide and punch through, and it works really well. It centers everything nicely on there. So far, getting it set up has been very easy. It is really nice and uniform. I will say one difference is that these holes are just slightly bigger than the holes produced by this punch. But I found that that was totally fine, because when you punch a whole bunch of pages and you're doing them in smaller sections, sometimes they're not going to be perfectly lined up. And also when you're holding your materials to bind them, they might not be exactly right. I was going to see if I could show you. You can kind of see it on this hole right here. So it's not exactly uniform in there. Some pages are a little here, some are that way. And so when you are sewing it with your wax linen thread, your bookbinding needle, it can be helpful to have a little bit more room in there to play with, especially when you're binding this style, because you're usually putting the thread through the hole 2 to 3 times. So you need a little bit more room than a typical binding. So let's try it. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just going to do a noble binding on this. One of the biggest differences that I have noticed with this is that typically I was taught that you put your holes for your binding 1 inch in from your side here and 1 inch down from the top. So that's the biggest difference for me from kind of my standard formula for these style books. I think that it's probably fine. Oh goodness. Okay, so talking about making sure you have plenty of space in here, that was a great example. I like to keep it real with you all, and I make mistakes too. What happened there was when I was sewing through, my needle split the thread, and that's something that you really need to be mindful of. And as you go, you can, this is a little bit of paper there, so let me get that out of the way. As you go, you can kind of like this one, the string, I'm pulling it that way away from the hole, so that when I put my thread through next time, or my needle through next time, I can make sure that it's coming through and not hitting or splitting either of those threads that are already in there. And that's what I was saying earlier about why it's actually good to have a little bit of larger holes here. So then I just kind of tighten it up. Going back to what I was saying before, that little bit of a slip up there on the thread, is that typically I have the holes a little bit deeper on the cover, and in terms of binding, it is fine. It will be nice. It'll be stable. You don't ever want to have your holes too close to the edge, because you don't want them to the thread to pull out if you're tightening it. You don't want it to be able to easily rip out through the pages. This has a thick enough stack of pages and covers that I'm not really worried about it pulling. I actually think that it may be beneficial to have them the holes a little bit closer to the edge, because if you have, so these are a 1/2 inch deep. Usually I do 1 inch deep, but if you think about it, that means the book can't flex open until where it gets to the holes. So if you have them 1 inch deep, you're having less paper that's actually accessible. So having these be a 1/2 inch deep, it gives you a little bit more space, a little bit more room on the page, and for it to open up. So I actually think this could be a really nice benefit of doing it with this punch and having the holes a little bit closer to the edge of the spine. All right, so like I said, this is a noble binding. It's just a, it's like, I would say the most simple kind of basic binding structure that I usually teach when I teach this. And it's because once you get the idea of how to do this one, then you can get a little bit more creative with it and do some other fun designs. So I'm going to show you that in just a second. I just want to tie this one and finish it. Okay, so here is a look at a finished Japanese stab bound noble binding made with a Coptic punch. I think it's kind of funny to use, you know, something that's made for one style of binding with to do a totally different binding. But so what I did after I kind of came up with this first idea of trying the noble binding was, there's some other bindings that are Japanese stab bindings. They're different patterns basically that I like to do when I'm teaching. But like I said, this other binding that I typically do is called the hemp leaf binding. So it actually has 2 rows of holes and kind of you go back and forth. So I knew I wouldn't be able to do exactly that with this machine. So what I did was I created this one as a sample for my class. So how I did this was kind of a combination. I prepped all of the materials with this punch to create these 4 holes here. And because the holes are all spaced 1 inch apart, it was very easy to make my next set of holes based off of that. So I just basically took my finished materials, lined everything up on my grid, and then with my ruler across this line here, I went a 1/2 inch down and I made another 3 holes, just a little tick mark. And then I brought in my old standard hand punch. And so it was kind of fun to do a combination of the two. So starting, like cutting the work almost in half, maybe a little bit more than half, by doing 4 of the holes with this punch and then just kind of going back through and adding this one in. Now this design is not actually the hemp leaf. It's a little bit different design. I'm not sure if this one has an official name or not, because I was kind of just, I had the general idea and concept of I want to do 2 lines of holes and I will just play around with it and see how it goes. And so I just did this where it's kind of like arrows almost, or little mountains or houses. I think you could kind of interpret it however you want. But I thought this was a really interesting way to use this punch and not just give up and say, well, it can only do this one style of binding, it can only do this noble binding, but to use it to do kind of the basic one, but also the a little bit more intricate. And I could go ahead and like try different things. This one, obviously, I could do more wraps and do more sewing stitches around if I really wanted to kind of make this design more intricate. I wanted to keep it kind of simple because in the class I'll be teaching this one, and then if people are interested, they could kind of try to do this one as well. Like I said, it's not necessarily that it's a difficult stitch, it's just that there's a lot of steps to it. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you like these style of notebooks, and do you think that you would ever use this tool to create these? So I hope you've enjoyed seeing this video and seeing what you can do with a Coptic punch for a different style bookbinding. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.